everyone, and welcome to Be Bold, Fierce, Unstoppable. I'm your host, Zach Lyotis, and on today's show, I am so excited to introduce you to this amazing author that had me turning the pages of a book like I haven't done in a very long time. The story that she wrote was incredible, and it really touched many parts of my heart and opened up my eyes to realize that we all have a special gift within us that's so magical. Let me introduce to you Lynnda Pollio. She's a consciousness doula and an author of a multi-award-winning, best-selling visionary novel, Trusting the Currents. Lynnda has always been deeply committed to elevating human consciousness. This life purpose has guided her as an accomplished New York advertising executive and as a thought leader in the conscious business and communications practices, and as the world's first chief consciousness officer at a global futurist marketing consultancy. She is experienced in various spiritual disciplines, energetic practices, and healing modalities. As a consciousness doula, she helps people understand and connect to energetic frequencies that expand self-awareness for personal and global transformation. She believes we are all in the process of becoming something unexpected and that the answers lies in the heart. Lynnda recently moved from New York City to Sedona, Arizona. Help me welcome Lynnda Pollio. Hello, Lynnda. How are you?
Hi, Zach. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really looking forward to speaking with you.
This is such a pleasure. Like I said in the introductory, your book was such a page turner. Trusting the Currents. I would say it's number ones on the Zach list. Do I get a list that I can write before the list? This has been like the number one book that not only that I was reading it, I felt your main character, but I also felt things shifting within my own body. But before we get into the book, Lynnda, let's talk about what led you or where you were before the book even started, before the book was even birthed as an advertising executive.
Well, I ran new business for ad agencies for a number of years, and that was a while ago. And what happened was in the middle of working within the advertising industry, my father became ill. And I ended up taking care of him for about a year before he died. And after he passed, I heard a voice tell me to go to Sedona, Arizona. So I jumped on a plane. I had nowhere to stay. I didn't know why I was going, how long I was going for. I got here and I ended up renting this little place and staying for 5 months. And in that period of time, I had all these mystical experiences and went on raw foods and basically completely changed the way that I lived. I later understood it to be something that Buddhists call plunging, where you pull yourself into a different environment and everything is different. I changed the way I ate. I changed my physical environment. I'd never been in a high desert experience before. I didn't know anyone here. And as I was here, kind of layers of old conditioning, like an onion, just peeled away from me until I felt like I was my essential self. And that's when I went back to New York. And when I went back, I didn't feel like I could just be doing advertising anymore. I really felt like I wanted to make a difference in the planet. And so the whole idea of working within conscious business practices kind of came to me. And so I started working with what I call the human technologies, which are wisdom, intuition, compassion, empathy, forgiveness, and gratitude. And I began working with companies to bring these technologies into the corporate culture and working with their employees and with their partners and with their consumers. So I did that for quite a while. I was considered a thought leader in that, and I was really at the beginning of all that. And then I just started hearing a woman's voice, but I actually I became the world's first chief consciousness officer. I had taken care of my mother, had a stroke. So I took care of my mother for 2 years and I didn't do anything else except care for her. She came out of it. I do healing work. So I pulled her out of the stroke. She completely healed from it. But I was a little wiped out, and the idea of starting my own consultancy again did not work for me. So I decided to get a job, and I went to work for a global marketing consultancy. And I convinced the owner to create a position as a chief consciousness officer, which I had been trying to do in advertising for a number of years and couldn't quite get anyone to go for it. So she agreed, and I worked with Fortune 100 companies, with the CEOs and CMOs, trying to get these human technologies filtered through into their system. And it was a really amazing experience. I loved it. And as I decided to break away and start my own consulting business again, because I was completely at that point committed to human consciousness, I quit my job, and 4 hours later, my mother fell and shattered her femur, had a seizure, and I went into full-time 24/7 care for 9 years.
Wow.
So it was a very intense time. And then I started hearing, I was working on a little project, and I was on my computer, and I was sitting in my apartment, and I heard a old Black Southern woman's voice. And her first words to me was, "It's not what happened to me that matters." And I had always gotten high knowledge, but I'd never really heard her voice before. So it kind of shocked me and scared me a little bit, but I just wrote down that sentence, and then I just sat on my computer and I just heard her voice in my head. It was very clear. So I just continued writing what she had been telling me. And she spoke for a couple paragraphs, and then I felt her leave, and I was like, okay, that's sort of it. And then 3 or 4 days later, I felt her again, and I continued the conversation with her. And what I found was that she began to tell me a story, and I had to agree to tell the story. And I knew there was an invitation from her to tell the story. And so I said yes. And that began my relationship with Addie Mae. And we just, whenever I would feel her presence, I would either go to my computer, or if I was driving or whatever, I have to pull over with a piece of paper, and she would keep telling me her story. She always wrote stream of consciousness. I never knew where I was going in the story until I was writing the story. I wrote for about a year while I was taking care of my mother and trying to have a little bit of a consultancy. And then she told me I had to go back to Sedona, Arizona. So I went back to Sedona, Arizona. I hired a full-time caregiver to take care of my mother for a while. And I finished writing the book in Sedona. And Sedona became really the backdrop to the story, because nature plays a really big role in the book. And all of my experiences in nature in Sedona ended up inside the book, including the cover, which is the dragonfly. And while I was in Sedona, I had a relationship with dragonflies, and I used to be able to call them to me, and they'd land on my finger. And I had an experience with a dragonfly doing that when I was sitting in the creek one day, and I called it over and it landed on my finger. And the next morning when I got back to the book and Addie Mae came, there's a scene in the book about a dragonfly coming to Addie Mae, as you know,
Yeah.
and that became the icon for Addie Mae, and really the icon for the transformation that the book represents. So I basically channeled the book. I came back from Sedona. I was really involved with my mother. I put the book away for a year. I didn't think I was ever going to publish it, because it was all written in very heavy Southern Black dialect. And as you can tell, I'm not Southern or Black. So I figured
You've been chosen.
I figured it was just sort of, it was kind of like, it was just for me. I really felt it was just for me, that it was something that I was supposed to do, but I never expected to get it out into the world. And I came back and put it away and went back to my caregiving role. And about a year after that, I started hearing Addie Mae telling me it was time to edit the book. So, and until then, when I looked at the manuscript, I didn't have any connection to the book whatsoever. I titled it, it was actually called something else for most of its life. It was called Soul Seeds for almost all of its existence. It took me 10 years to write the book, so it was a very long journey for me. And I basically just, wrote what I needed to write with her. And when she came to me, I would continue writing, and then I would put it away. And she wanted me to take out the heavy Southern Black dialect in the narrative and leave it in the dialogue. So it took me, I didn't know how to write at that point in time.
You learn when you have to, don't you?
She really became my writing coach.
Yeah.
So that's why it took me so long, because not only did I have to learn how to write, but I had to learn how to bring energetic frequencies that she was bringing into the writing. So sometimes I would work on a sentence for 3 hours because the sentence had to have a certain cadence and flow when you read it. And I always tell people, if you read a sentence in the book that really resonates with you, read it out loud, because I believe there's some kind of sound therapy embedded in that.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what it is. I mean, there's a lot still to this book that I'm learning about. It seems to have, it's almost like a blueprint for consciousness. And it was interesting because when I first channeled the book, I didn't have any connection to any of the lessons and any of the experiences that Anime had.
Interesting.
And I came back thinking that, oh, I'm this great teacher. Like, I really felt this power that she had given me. And then as I came back and I was taking care of my mother, and I went into a dark night of the soul, and it was really awful. And then I really learned that I was the book's biggest student. And she, over the years, took me through each of the lessons and each of the experiences that the characters had. So, I hadn't lost a mother at that point, but I did during the process of finishing the book up.
Yeah.
And so it got to be the point where years, and then I would stop and I would begin and stop and begin, because I was tied up with my mother, and I kept thinking, this is crazy. No one's going to want to read a book by a white woman writing about a Black family. And plus, I'm a terrible writer. I was positive I was a terrible writer because I couldn't get any friends to read my book.
Wow.
I was very isolated in the experience. So, and that's why I kept giving up, but she kept coming back and bringing me back into it, or something. She always would bring something magical, like someone would call me and say, oh, I love what you just wrote. So it would pull me back into the book again.
Yeah.
Or weird things like Ted Turner touched this book. I mean, the interesting people would somehow stumble onto it and encourage me to keep going. So
I'm really happy that you wrote this book. Like, I'm so glad that you had the courage, got rid of those limited beliefs. Because listen, I had the same limited beliefs that I'm not a good writer. I can't write. When I was in school, it told me I wouldn't amount to anything. Like, I was making spelling mistakes. People laughed at me. And then I realized, you know what? Though I can't deal with that. I started telling myself, you're a great writer. You're a great writer. You write exquisite stuff. But I understand what you felt going through that. But this book is a total page turner. I'm so glad that you got the courage to write it, because it brought a lot of wisdom and lessons out for me as well.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I find that with people reading it, it's been interesting the diversity of the people that are reading it. I really thought this book was going to be for women because it's strong women characters, and it's a really heart-based book. But almost half my reviews on Amazon are from men. And I also have learned that the ages are from like 13 to 94 have read this book. It's been all different religions, all different races, all different cultures. It sells books all over the world. I mean, the hardest part for this book is discoverability, because it's not really a genre. I mean, it's visionary fiction, but it's not like a typical genre within the literary world. So it's not something you can explain very well. It's almost like a book that needs to be experienced, and it calls to you.
Yes.
And I can't just say, okay, it's not like a thriller that I can find my thriller writers. It's a book that speaks to the heart. So it's people who are going through either a struggle in their lives and need guidance, or it's people that are open. Their heart is open, and this kind of validates their path in life. And so finding those people is kind of casting a wide net.
Yes, absolutely. I keep on hearing it's part of an inspirational series. That's the only genre there is. It's called inspirational, because that's exactly what the book is really all about.
Yeah.
Inspiring.
Yeah. Well, it hit when it hit #1 in inspirational fiction on Amazon about a year ago. Yeah, which was very surprising. It's because I didn't do any promotion on this book for years because I was so tied up with my mother, but I did enter awards, just because it was easy. And it won 12 book awards over the period of 2 years. And that kind of kept me going while I was in the midst of this awful experience, caring for my mother who was in terrible pain, and, she was going to die, but it just took a long time and it was really hard. So that really helped me keep going. But I didn't really have time or resources, because all my resources were going into, paying for caregivers and paying for the house. And so it was a struggle. I mean, I really had to have faith. She really taught me faith.
Yeah.
I had to have faith that there was a reason why I was being pulled to this. And so, when she started winning awards, I was like, okay, it can't be terrible if it's if it's winning awards,
No,
because
it's not.
I actually had no idea if it was any good. And then slowly it just started finding, audiences, and it's really been finding people word of mouth. It gets gifted a lot to people, which I love. I mean, it loves to be given as a gift to someone. So, I mean, we'll see. I feel like now the book has really just begun to be what it's going to be. I think it had to catch up with the frequency of the planet. I
Yeah.
think it was a book before its time when I first wrote it, and I was very frustrated because I'm not a spring chicken, and I would really wanted this to happen when, before I got too old. And it's
Wise.
taken.
You're wise. No such thing as old. It's all about being wise. It's all
Well,
about.
I definitely have gotten wiser, and I
There you
definitely
go.
now have found that I am transforming into sort of a sage elder that I never would have expected, because in my life I was more like the young fairy. I
Mm,
was I was the young fairy running through, everything was light and love and everything was great. And then I stumbled into this dark night of the soul, which was very difficult, but it really matured my spirituality in a way that now I can look back at and go, I get it and I'm grateful for it. But at the time, it wasn't so grateful. So, I always encourage anyone that's going through a really hard time that looks like it's never going to end.
mhm.
It does. And I find that the thing that really changed for me was when I accepted the struggle I was in and accepted the place I was in and surrendered into it without resisting it. That made a big difference, and that began to change first my sort of insight and feeling about it, but then it started changing the actual reality of it. And it was a slow process, and I was not always a good student.
Yeah.
But
You're typically not always a good student.
no, it's hard. I mean, this whole
It's
idea
hard.
that we're wise is not. I mean, and I think, the culture causes us to think that if we don't do it right, and if we don't, if we're not strong, and if we don't like shake it out, there's something wrong with us and we're weak. But really, our strength comes in our vulnerability,
Yes.
and it's particularly becomes strength when we share that vulnerability with other people.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I've realized that when I've done a lot of book clubs with the book, and it's been really rewarding, because I find that when I'm doing a book club with readers, a lot of readers, even though they're book club members, even though they know each other for sometime years, they'll have intimate conversations about themselves because of trusting the currents, because it brings up all these things
Yes.
that they don't know about each other. And so it brings them to another level of intimacy with each other, which has been really nice to see, and
Absolutely.
yeah, it's been nice.
Absolutely. Let's get into the book a little bit because I could hear
Oh,
Ashley
okay.
go, let's talk about the book. Let's talk about the book. But
He's
Zach,
like, how about me? How about
yeah,
me?
and that's exactly what's happening. Because I'm like, just let her tell us. Her. It's like, just let's talk about the book, but leave this part out. And I said, okay, no problem. So let's talk about the book a little bit because Adam May is this. I pinned her down as this Southern young woman at late 40s, 1950s, 60s, out in Mississippi. I could actually hear her voice like, Adam May, yes, mama. Like I could actually hear that every time
Yeah.
I read that. And then there were some other things that when I was reading it, I had to read it a couple of times because I would hear, you didn't say that right. And it's like that big Southern accent,
Hmm.
And I was like, well, Adam May, I really can't really say what you're telling me to say right now, but I'm getting the gist of what it is. And go back. I had a lot of fun with Adam May because she is this powerful source of energy that when you are open to receiving the wisdom that she has written this book through you, it actually activates parts of us. So let's talk about the part when Jenny first came to Adam May.
Okay.
Right? It was Uncle Joe that brought her, but so much happened in the teachings through Jenny to recognize Adam May, because Jenny was a whole different beast on her own.
Yeah, and a lot of people, that's their favorite character is Jenny, because Jenny is the spiritual center of the book, but she's also the center of the tragedy in the book, which very often go together anyway.
Right? It really does.
So yeah, so she's her in her own little world, and she becomes a teacher for Addie May as well.
Yeah, I hear Adam May saying that was my greatest teacher. She was my greatest teacher. She taught me how to be me.
Exactly.
She taught me how to be me, how to be unapologetically me. I have to say that right. Unapologetically me. She taught me not to worry about what other people said. She taught me just to be free. So her getting these lessons from Jenny, what did that teach you while you writing this whole book? And I hear, you know, you said earlier you're afraid, you didn't think you're a good writer, but you found that courage. So just like she found the courage in Jenny, how did you find that courage within yourself?
What, to write the book or to
just everything about the book, like your teachings and lessons? What were some teachings and lessons that you got from that?
Oh my God. I mean, I said every lesson in the book, which I didn't have before. I mean, all the lessons about, well, first of all, the power of nature. Even though I've always loved nature, I really didn't understand just how powerful it was. When you really connect into nature, it is healing and it is guiding. And you know, one of the lessons that Jenny speaks to Addie May a lot about is about self-respect.
Yes.
And I think that's particularly, and I have a lot of mothers and teenage daughters read the book together, which I love, because it is very much a book about having self-respect. And there's one scene where Addie May meets this boy that becomes her boyfriend, and she's never been kissed before. And Jenny is a very experienced in that world.
She very much so.
She just does what she wants to do, and she doesn't really care what anyone thinks. She's her own woman completely, even at that young age. And she doesn't go by the cultural standards of her time or of her place in time. But there's a scene where Addie May kisses her boyfriend for the first time, but doesn't really know what's next. And so Jenny tries to explain to her what's next, which is about, you know, this tongue coming into you and all this. And Addie May is horrified.
Yeah.
And Jenny's sort of gift to her was to say, you know how you like cherry sodas, Addie May, because Addie May loves cherry sodas. Well, let's say you go to the candy store and you sit down to have a cherry soda, and the store tells you, okay, we don't have any cherry sodas, but because we don't, we're going to give you a root beer, and we're going to give it to you for free. And so you drink this root beer, and it's really good, and it's rich and foamy, but it's not a cherry soda. So you're satisfied by it, but it's not really what you wanted. And kissing boys is like that. And the trick in life is to find the cherry sodas, and don't kiss the root beers, no matter how sweet they may be. You know, it's to really like follow your heart and stick with what you really are called to in life, without letting other people's decisions be made for you. And I think that was the big lesson for Jenny, was teaching Addie May to have her own mind. Because when she was born, she thought she was going to get married and have babies and kind of follow in her mother's footsteps and in most of the girls in her town. But she really was called to be a different kind of woman. But she had to find the courage and the guidance to kind of help that. And that's what Jenny did. Jenny gave her ultimately the courage to walk on her own without paying attention to what other people thought about her.
It almost seems like you went through that same journey that you had to walk on your own when people didn't want to read your book.
I told, yes, exactly.
Feedback. So that's like such a huge thing that, you know, Jenny was teaching Adame how to be courageous and walk on her own. And here you were throughout the whole book walking on your own because no one wanted to read it. And I wish back then I knew, because I've been like, sure, bring it to me. But this is such a courageous thing for you to do, because I know that sometimes, you know, as much as we don't need that validation, it's nice to have that validation to say, you know what, at least to have a few people walking with me. She knows she has Jenny with her all the way through.
Right.
You know,
Jenny and Mama. I mean, she really had, her mother was a traditional mother, but she loved her and she supported her. But she was more the, just settle down, be a good girl. I want you to be safe. But ultimately she wanted her to be happy too. So, and that was, I mean, ultimately the book is a book about love, you know, about, that's, I think if you had to distill it down, it's a book about love. It's a book about self-love, family love, romantic love, and what that really is, and how do you know you're with the right person or not. So there's so many different lessons and stories that are woven through this that, you know, anyone can really relate to. I mean, there's kind of 3 levels to the book. There's a story, which is a coming of age story of this young girl, and the which depends on, again, like everyone who reads the book thinks it's a different time and a different place. And when I was writing the book and I had a couple of people look at it, they say, well, where is this? I'd say, I don't know. She's not telling me where it is. I know it's in the South, but I don't know where. And they'd say, well, you have to pick a place. So I would try picking, it's in Mississippi, it's in Georgia. And Addie may always say, no, you take out that. And I didn't understand why. And I find out later that the reason she did that was when someone from Mississippi reads the book, they think the book is written in Mississippi. When someone from Georgia reads the book, they tell me they know that town in Georgia. So everyone from the South who reads the book feels a sense of ownership of it. And even the timing, I mean, for me, it was set in the South in the late 1930s, rural South, but people think it's from the 50s and the 60s. And I think that was one thing that Addie Mae wanted to leave open was, you know, because it's everyone's story. And I've had middle-class white men from New Jersey write me reviews on Amazon saying, you know, I'm a white man from New Jersey and I am Addie Mae. And you know,
I said that to you too.
Yes.
We're all Addie Mae.
We're all Addie Mae. Yeah.
Because I was going to say, not only is this story about love and family and unification, but it also really is about non-judgment, because Uncle Joe was a cannonball, but yet they still loved him equally, and they still support him, even though how crazy he was. They didn't really support him. They really wanted him to run away. But they still had this thing of him. They just allowed him to be who he was. They always said that, you know, the devil got the worst of Uncle Joe, like through his karma, but they just allowed him to be who he was. They kept an eye on him, but that's all they did. So this book is also about allowing people to be who they truly are. Just like Jenny, she had to be who she truly was. Adame, Mama, they all had this individualization that was accepted. With everybody. That's what I loved about like this whole book, was that everyone was accepting of who the other person was. You know, even though they had a little bit of a riff, they still also came up more solid than they ever as a family unit. Right. So there was so much. And then when Jenny went through a few different transformations, she found her answers in nature. And that just taught me, and I knew this already, but as a reader reading this book, I'm like, see, nature has all the answers. The river will bring you down the right path. The trees are going to talk to you. The wind's going to guide you. It was this whole, I can't even explain it. It was this whole inner being energy that came through me. So that's why when I even sent you a message, I said, where is this story taking place? And you said, I don't know, where do you think? And I told you, like, you know, and I said, Adame is in each and every one of us, because I thought she was all about you at one point. And I was just like, this is incredible, incredible. what changed in your life after you finished writing this book and, you know, feeling everything? Like, how did your life journey change?
Oh, I mean, I write in the book as I created her, she created me. Like I basically became a different person. I was on one track in my life before she came into my life, and by following her, she just put me on a different track. I've, everything about me changed. The way I communicate changed. The way I believe, the things I believe change. I had never, like I said, I had always gotten high knowledge. I've always been very spiritual and conscious and had unusual experiences as a child. But I had never heard voices before. So
Like you.
yeah, she helped me believe that whatever those voices are, because we really never know,
Yeah.
but whatever they are, it was real. And even if it was an aspect of me that was emerging from that perspective, it guided me in directions that I never would have gone. I became way more involved in work and consciousness and spirituality. I um, I started having this like really intense connection to particularly Black women. I mean, I really felt a special, kind of love for them almost, because I had spent all this time with this family as I was writing them, and I had African American friends, but I felt so immersed in it that I felt the energy of the soul and the path they had been on. I mean, even though I didn't know it from a real perspective, there was a soul connection I felt through Addie Mae, and I I really believe from that point on that Black women are basically the future of this global transformation, that the energies that they hold and the soul and the heart and the struggles they've had, I mean, we need them making decisions for us now. And I think that was the big thing for me. I was in fact, when I first got the book done and I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll try to get it published traditionally, which I decided not to eventually because it was such an odd book. I decided I'm just going to do this myself. I tried finding an African American agent, and I couldn't find one. There weren't any at the time, and that was discouraging. So through a long journey of speaking to publishers and speaking to authors and I decided to indie publish this. And I had no idea what I was getting into. Again, it was one of these leaps into the unknown that Addie Mae pushed me into. It took me a year and a half. I thought I was going to go insane. It was way more difficult than I thought it was. And again, I was in the process of caring for my mother still. And I, got the book out, and it was a sense of not quite relief, but it was a sense of accomplishment, that I felt like I had these amazing women I felt were behind me, and they were supporting me in ways that even people around me at that time were not supporting me. So I think, I mean, we have our help on our inside, and we have help on the outside. And sometimes we have to go to the help on the inside if we want to get to a certain place in life, because we're not getting the external support that we would like. So
yeah, that sounds like Jenny near the end of the book, where she had to take matters in her own hands, and she had to go within nature to listen to nature to guide her to what she had to go find at that point.
Yeah, she listened to her higher guidance, and nature was her higher guidance. Probably more, nature was her conduit to higher guidance.
Yeah.
And it allowed her, it spoke to her in ways that it did not speak to Addie Mae. Addie Mae could appreciate it, but she never was attached to it in the same way that Jenny was. And so that's why she leaned on Jenny for that kind of counseling. And Addie Mae's other big lesson and big support was about reading and about education. And it was a teacher who gave her a bunch of books way before she left town and said, I want you to promise me before you get married, I want you to read every single one of these books because they're going to help you think about yourself in different ways. And if you still want to get married and stay in Oakville, that's fine, but don't make that decision based on not knowing the world outside of you.
Yeah.
So that was the other aspect that that transformed Addie Mae and helped lift her from her expected path in life.
Yeah, it's funny that you brought the teacher up because I kept on hearing, speak about my teacher, speak about my teacher. And let's stay on this topic right now because she had so many chances to stop reading those books that she was guided to read because of the external influence of her boyfriend that was, making somewhat of a judgment on her. Let's just call it that at the end of the day. But Addie Mae was so adamant of saying, no, I've kept my promise.
It was all about the promise. Yeah.
All that promise. And that's what really got me. That had me thinking, like, she made a promise to her teacher. Really, she made a promise to herself to read all this, but she didn't veer away from her promise to herself, like the way typically, normal society would do at the end of the day.
Right.
Like, she really kept strong to her promise. And she started to recognize something different about herself in that.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And she grew so much. But what made me laugh even more was when she walked by a bus stop and she saw the elder with all these books on his lap. And it was like, what are you reading over there? Because it almost felt like, let's just become more expansive in our knowledge so that, maybe I could make another decision. But like just that awareness that her teacher brought her and that her using that as a tool to grow, because I know I've read tons of books. This is one thing that I loved about Addie Mae. I've been reading tons of books since the age of 16 years old, personal development, not much spirituality. And it was one of those things that I learned it, but like Addie Mae, I didn't put it in practice as quick as I should have. Right? I'm going to admit that one.
Right.
But Addie Mae took everything in practice. Like she really reflected on a lot of things that the book said within her life. She really took things to a different level. And that's what it was like. I almost felt like Addie Mae saying, there's no time to waste. Like, just go, have faith, believe, trust. Like, people are going to come, people are going to go, have your close knitters around, and eventually you might not have full contact with them, but eventually everyone will come together. That's why I hope that there's another book sequel to this one, because
Addie Mae has just kind of come back to me after all these years, and she has told me we have 3 more books to write, which is a little overwhelming for me because just writing the one, I really didn't think I was ever going to write another book because I didn't feel like I wrote the first book for a long time. When I first channeled it, it took 2 years, and I didn't even put my name on the book as the writer. I put by Addie Mae Aubrey as told to Lynnda Pollio because I had no connection to the story whatsoever on any level. But then after years of editing the book, which was very hard for me because I really didn't know how to write and I didn't know how to edit, and it was very torturous. Then I put my name on it and I had a sense of ownership. And I think that was sort of like, you do the work. Like I had to do the work to be able to claim that I wrote the book. And, I feel like Addie Mae was guiding me the whole way, but it was a difficult process. And afterwards I was like, I will never do this again. And I thought about it a couple times because everyone keeps saying you need to write another book, but I wasn't going to just try to write another book. I needed to have a similar experience. And just recently, Addie Mae has whispered that there are 3 more books, and 2 of them are going to be her stories, and the last one is some other story which I don't even know. And so I've begun to just kind of take some notes, but she told me we're going to start in about 3 months, that I'm still in the process of settling from my recent move and, kind of my past, and that I need to kind of ground myself a little bit more before she returns. So we'll
It's
see.
funny, as you're saying that, I hear her saying, well, now that you learned all that, don't you think it'll be easier to write? So
Well, she told me it's going to be faster and easier this
that's
time.
exactly what I just got. It's going to be
Yeah,
faster and easier.
yeah,
So
that's what she told me. It's not going to be, because it was beautiful. The channeling part of the book, when it was just her speaking to me, was magical, because I literally just had to sit there and wait for her. I used to call it jumping into the Indigo Abyss, because I would get up in the morning, like I keep my computer literally in bed with me. I'd wake up at dawn, I'd put the computer on my lap, and I'd sit there and wait for her to come. And when I would feel her, it was this kind of uncomfortable feeling in the beginning. And I always got this feeling of I had to jump into this indigo abyss. And the indigo abyss was cold in the beginning. I had to know I was jumping into ice cold water. So it was very uncomfortable to allow her to first come to me. But once I allowed that uncomfortableness, it would, like, then I would jump in, and we would sink into this warm current. And as soon as the current was there, and I would just be taken away. And then we would just, it was a stream of consciousness for 3 to 4 hours a day. And then she would leave. It would be very spontaneous. It would just be, I'm going. And sometimes I'd want to keep writing. And so I would keep writing, and I always would throw out what I wrote on my own. I'd have to throw out the next day what I wrote on my own. And she'd go, no, we're going back to what I wrote.
yeah,
And
yeah, I could see that.
that was that for 2 years. And that was a very magical time. It was easy to write because I was just listening to a voice. It was after I came back and she disappeared. She left right away. The moment I wrote the last words of the first draft, she was gone immediately. And I didn't really hear her too much. I would feel her. She would always laugh at me when I was afraid. She found fear to be really funny.
Yeah,
She
yeah,
found fear to be really funny. She didn't quite get why we were so afraid of everything. So I would hear her laughing. And I used to take care of baby birds when I was young that fell out of nests. And when you raise a baby bird that falls out of a nest, they learn to fly before they eat. And then they come back to eat. And then they learn to eat without you. But they would, so the birds would fly. And then if I'd call them, they would chirp to let me know they were there, but they wouldn't come back to me. They would chirp to say, don't worry, I'm okay. But they wouldn't come back to me. And that's how it felt with Addie Mae after the first draft. Was she would chirp to let me know she was there, but I would not hear her in the same way. And when it came to the editing, she may have been there kind of supporting me in the background, but I was not aware of it.
yeah.
And it was very hard. And I went through a lot of practice and practice and practice and practice. This is why it took me 8 years of editing, because I didn't know what I was doing, and I had to make the book. It wanted to have a certain kind of languaging to it.
Yeah.
And that was languaging that many people could digest. And that would hold the frequencies that she was bringing in, and that would also share the sort of universal life messages, spiritual life messages that were woven through the book, that, you know, were very human, that all of us go through at some point in our lives.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the thing. Like, I felt when I was reading the book, I felt so much of what you just described. And I felt that, you know, after I stopped, like at the end of it, I was like, oh, I want to know what happens next. Like, what's next for Addie Mae? She's on a journey. Jenny's on a journey. Mama's on a journey. You know, Mr. Doyle's on a journey. Like, everyone's on this journey. So now
Right.
I want to know, how are they all going to kind of come together? So that's why I was like, once I was done, I was like, no. There's no way that you're going to just leave me hanging like this. So I know that the next book is going to be quicker because Addie Mae is saying that, but you know what? God bless you for putting all this together, because I can't imagine all the work it does take just to channel. I know it takes a lot of energy then to write it and all this stuff, but the lessons and wisdom that come with this book are incredible. I really love it. But there was one thing that it's so funny. I read the whole book and I was like, I haven't taken any marks in it. And I said, you don't need to take any marks. I usually write all over my book. But there's one part that Addie Mae said, I want you to talk about this part.
Oh, interesting.
Near the end of the book. And I was like, okay, so here we go. Page 267, second paragraph. I realized what we want from life is not necessarily what our souls yearn for. But if we learn to trust the storms that push us off our determined course, God cares for our struggles and leads us to our rightful shore. Knowing when to swim with strength and courage and when to surrender to the changing currents is all we need to find our true way.
And that's basically one of the big messages in the book. And that's why at the end of the book, the whole purpose of the ending was to help people understand that it's about taking the risks and about following your heart and not really knowing where it's going to end, because it's really in taking that leap into the unknown that you are born, and how it ends is not really the power of that experience. It is the power of taking the leap. And that's what they all do. You know, they, in their own way, they take these leaps into the unknown, and they teach us how to do it.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I loved about it. But like, Addie Mae always had this yearning of knowing she was taken care of. I think it was after Jenny left, she started becoming closer to nature and forest. So she started going in there a lot more, where she started trusting herself. She started trusting her intuition that much more. But it was the first line that actually got me. I realized what we want from life is not necessarily what our souls yearn for. And it's so, in that line alone, you could I found that I was able to ponder on that line for hours.
Yeah, I know. She was a wise woman. She's a wise woman. You know, I'm glad that she chose me. I'm happy now. I wasn't always happy.
Yeah, I can imagine.
She's pretty big. She was always a pretty big taskmaster. Like once I said yes, she was insistent. But she was so wise. And when I was the most afraid is when she, really enveloped me with humor and with compassion and with faith, and said, just keep going, and it, again, like, it was never about whether this book was going to be published or whether people were going to read it. It was about me completing the book. That was what she was all about, was that I had the faith and the courage to do something I never expected to do. Exactly. And to complete it.
Yes.
Even if I wasn't sure how it was going to end. And I think, so that's why I was like, okay, I'm done. And then obviously that wasn't the ending, but I thought it was at first. But yeah, so that was the big lesson for me.
Yeah, that's huge, because that line alone made me really sit back and ponder. So it was such a great lesson for you to say, we need to get this completed, because it's not what we think in life is what we want in life is not always what our soul yearns. So your soul was totally yearning something else than you even imagined it to yearn. And it kind of brings me back to a lot of people that I work with that, are in marriages or are doing things that they think that they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, their soul's telling them something totally different. And this is also, I'm going through a massive transformation right now. So this book came to me at the most perfect time, because I didn't think I was going down this path that I'm going down. And it was always like a path that I was avoiding, and a path that I was like, I don't have a clue how to deal with this path. So this book was one of those, for me, came at Addie Mae came at the most perfect time for me, because that's why that paragraph was so huge, because I didn't expect to do what my spirit is telling me to do right now. But reading that line was like, yeah, what we thought we were supposed to do, but what our soul is yearning are two different things. So just like trust the current and know that we're always taken care of. And it might be scary and you might have to go through roadblocks. And just like you, it might take 8 years to do the editing.
Yeah, and it might be awful. I mean, you might have to go into it. I mean, a lot of people that go through major transformations in their life, which many people are right now. We're in that time in the world. You're going to go through a dark night of the soul. You're going to go through really difficult times that you didn't expect to go through. You're going to lose things you didn't expect to lose. You're going to become something you didn't expect to become. And the fastest that you can allow that process to happen and not try to hold on to the past, it's the holding on to what you thought you were going to be, which causes all the pain. When you finally like push off from the shore and you go, okay, I will take this attempt. And then you eventually will start like you and I finding each other. You will eventually find other people in that new space that you didn't expect to go to. And in finding other souls that are in the same space, you begin to find who you are now. And, you know, most of us are going to become multiple people in these one bodies we have.
Yeah.
And once we realize that that's okay.
Yeah, right. That's the only thing I keep on hearing. It's okay to be you.
It's okay to be you. It's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to fail. It's okay to not be like everyone else. And even everyone else wants to be
Someone else.
Themselves. Yeah, and it's mostly the mask we wear that we project to each other instead of, you know, who we really are. And you know, Addie Mae really teaches just to take down the mask and have faith and realize it's going to be a little bumpy road, but that you will not be alone on that road.
Yes, absolutely. Lynnda, thank you so much for this book. I can't
Zach,
wait for the other books to come out. I really am looking forward to it.
Me too.
I'm looking forward to it. Anyone, if you're going through literally a transformation that is, you can't make sense of it, or it's uncomfortable, or you may not understand what is happening, or you just simply need some sort of guidance, this book will help you through so many different transitional phases. So trusting the currents of not only what's happening on the external world, but what's happening internally. And Addie Mae has some really incredible lessons in the book. I'll tell you right now, you will grow, you will soar, you'll recognize things about you. You may have to read the book a couple of times. I know I'm going to read it again when I have a moment, because each lesson, each journey, all the characters teach us something different about ourselves. Even the characters that go through misfortune teach us our fortunes. Even the ones that go through suffering teach us our beauty. Even those that go through confusion and want to be stagnant teach us how important it is to grow in life. And everyone teaches us that we're all in this together. We might not have the same journey, but an emotion is an emotion is an emotion. Trust, belief, and faith is something that is bestowed deep inside each and every one of us. Addie Mae has a beautiful way of telling her story, and Lynnda has a beautiful way of expressing the story that came through her body. It may have taken her 8 years, but I'm so proud and I'm so happy that she found the courage to fully surrender and let go and trust the currents herself. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Lynnda, thank you so much.
Thank you. And thanks for everyone. Thank you.
And everyone will catch up with you at the next podcast. Until next time, have yourself a great day. Bye for now.